Hi there. Today, I'm going to teach you how to bird or birdwatch. We like to use the term bird because watching birds isn't the only way to enjoy them. In fact, listening to birds can be equally as important, but I'll be getting into that later. Let's start with the basics. You want to learn how to bird, and you're interested in birds maybe because, you finally noticed that they occupy this world, or you just think they're interesting and, you just want to get into natural science. And I can't think of a better way to enjoy the natural world and to learn about it than to try and identify as many birds as possible. So I'm going to go through some of the basic techniques and steps that you need to take in order to start birding today, and perhaps even in the future. So the first thing I would do is you can take a casual approach to birding pretty easily. You just have to walk around, and if you see a bird, just pay attention to it. Try and figure out what it is, and starts very simply. For example, walking around a city, you're most likely to be able to see a pigeon, a seagull, or a house sparrow. These are very common birds in a city. So just start by looking at those ones, being able to be like, that's a house sparrow, that's a pigeon. It's a very basic step, seems kind of inconsequential, but that's the whole process, is just developing a base layer and building on top of that. So some of the things that you might want to get, though, if you're looking to become a more professional birder, I would highly recommend binoculars. These are a pair of Monarchs by Nikon. They probably cost me about $250. So, if you're on a very low budget, it can be kind of a pricey investment, but it's definitely the one tool that if you decide to get into birds, you'll never regret it, because these are really quite essential to viewing some birds, because birds can be very skittish and don't like to be around people. So it's good to be able to see them from a distance. It's just very helpful, and especially for identifying birds, very helpful to have these. I've been able to get around it for a really long time, but if you're really looking to get serious, invest in binoculars. They're all you'll ever need. This can be the one tool that you get. Now, if you're looking to sort of step up your game, there's just a few other things that I would recommend bringing with you. One is your phone or a notepad for keeping records of the birds that you find, because very quickly you're going to realize that it's kind of hard to remember everything you see as you go do a little stroll in a park or wherever. And so having a notebook available, or your phone just somewhere to keep notes of what you're seeing, is really crucial to being a good birder and hopefully using your observations and submitting them in a way that other people can use them, particularly scientists. That's part of the joy of birding, is that you can give that information to someone in the science field and learn a lot more about the natural world that way. So if you have your phone, one thing that I also recommend is getting a telephoto lens. So I always bring my phone in case I'm close enough to a bird and I want to take a photo, but you're going to find that a camera phone often doesn't get you as close as you'd like to get. So if you get one of these little attachment telephoto lenses, you can just clip these on your camera, and this gives about, I'm not quite sure, maybe 10 maxification, maybe more, which isn't much for a phone, but granted, it really does help. Like, I like to take videos of birds, obviously on this blog, so having this attachment is really crucial. And I like this one. This is some knockoff brand, but this focus here is really nice, because this clip is firm and this focus is very easy to turn. If you get a very cheap quality telephoto lens, this thing will swivel around on you and it'll be impossible to get it lined up. One thing I noted, though, is the clip covers the front, and so it makes it difficult to view because there's a little light sensor underneath where the clip is, and also your self-facing camera. So I drilled a little hole right where my front-facing camera is, so that way I can actually line it up on that, and it actually just centers this so much easier. It can be kind of complicated, but that's how I do a lot of my bird filmography, is with this setup. So notepad, binoculars, maybe this, that's all you need. Let's just start there. You can get the rest on the internet. I would recommend a couple websites that I'll link to in the description. So now you're ready the bird. You're outside. It's a great place to start. But you can also, have a bird feeder in your backyard. You can watch birds from the inside of your house if you want to. And if you decide to go outside, I would recommend going to like a park or some sort of, natural forested area, just because you're likely to see more varieties of birds, particularly by like waterways. There's a whole class of birds that just stick to the water, so it's great to have access to all those. And trees. You need to find places where birds can feel safe and feel like they can find food. That's a great place to look for birds. So once you're out in the woods, start by just kind of standing very quietly. It's important to be quiet. It's important to be listening and paying attention, if you really want to take it seriously, because birds can be very tricky to spot and they can be very secretive. So just stand still and listen. Try to locate sounds of birds. It's a great way to start, and probably the best way to try and locate birds is to hear them first and then follow them and then try and look for them. And it's a great way to identify birds as well, as to use your ears. That's a whole other classification of birding, which is why it's birding, not bird watching. And once you see like some motion in the trees or wherever you're looking, start there. Try and just look for motion, little things just like popping out of your vision that are darting across, because that's how you'll find the birds. And then once you kind of have a general sense of where they are, you can look for them in your binoculars, and make sure to take off your lens caps and untwist these. And you can focus with the middle. Just hold them up. It's pretty simple. Take very good care of the lenses. Don't wipe them with anything too abrasive. And put your caps on when you're done. You'll thank me later. So yeah, once you have these up, you very well might spot your bird. And if you don't see the bird, go back, take a look, relocate, and try and pinpoint. You'll get used to it. And then it comes just down to identifying the birds, which is really the hardest part, I think, for most people just starting, is that they really don't know what they're looking at. This is why having a camera, something better than this even, if you're already a photographer, or this is just a really cheap setup. Like my phone, I'm going to have my phone anyway. This lens was $25 with a couple of other lenses. Pretty great deal for what I got out of it. So this is a great way to be able to document what you see and then later go back and try and identify it. In fact, I really haven't been using my binoculars that much. I've mostly been using this setup so I can spot the bird, get a good picture, and then when I have time to get on the internet, just kind of go through, compare things, and see what I got and build up that knowledge base. But, either way, you can have your notebook, you can take notes, just try and describe the bird in as many ways as you can, and start with the basics. There's lots of different types of birds. There's some that cling to trees. There's some that are small and sing, that we call songbirds. Some are in the water, so they'll have their own classification. There's things like raptors, like hawks and eagles, tend to sort of soar in the sky. There's lots of different ways that birds inhabit the environment. So you just try and figure out like their kind of general sizes and, their habitat and, what they like to, how they behave really. And then sort of features to look for the sort of, get those more detailed identifications down is you want to look at things like their legs, their feet, their beaks, their heads. There's a lot of variation just in these tiny little features. Like it could be just a ring that's around the bill or their neck, a stripe above the eye. It's always very tiny things, which makes things like sparrows and warblers particularly hard to identify because they all look very similar from a distance but are quite different up close. And so, just try and figure out as many, different ways to look for birds. Again, there's all sorts of different types. And eventually you'll start to build up a knowledge base of what these birds are. And it can be, a bit of a stumbling block, but there's great website resources for figuring out what it is that you're looking at least just getting a general sense. So, and finally, one thing I recommend if you're looking to kind of take your observations and make them useful is to sign up for ebird.org. This is a website where it collects birding information all across the world. People are all writing in about the observations that they make, and then they use this data to track birds. And what's particularly cool, I think, about birds is that they're very well studied, and they're very sensitive to changes in weather and the environment. So when you track birds, you're really tracking the weather, you're tracking the climate, you're learning about how the whole atmosphere, or really, the atmosphere that we inhabit, as well as the land, the water, how all these things are changing just by using birds. It's just a really great way to understand things. And birds are really fun to learn about because there's so many of them. So if you, I've gotten to the point where you understand how to identify some basic birds. Then you can start submitting your observations online. So you go to eBird, you make a profile. When you go on an excursion, say you go to the park for an hour, that's pretty much what I do, is I spend about an hour in a park each day, just kind of walking around. And you list when you went, sort of what the conditions were, the weather maybe. You don't have to keep all this information, but just as you're looking for birds, tally up everything you see. Like robins, for example. An American robin is a pretty easily identifiable bird. And you generally see a lot of them when you're in a park. And so you just tally up every one that you see. You tally up every Canada goose you see. And, sometimes you get some cool things and you throw them in, and that's part of the fun, is finding new birds and adding them to your list. eBird kind of creates this social network atmosphere to it. So, but yeah, then you just make a list of all your birds and try to be really diligent about counting. You can make some estimates, but the pros out there, they're counting every bird they see, and they're identifying it to the best of their ability and not stepping beyond. If you're wanting to say, I saw this rare bird, have the evidence to back it up. Don't just make assumptions about something that might have been a cool bird when really it wasn't. It's okay to just say general, it's just a seagull. Seagulls can be particularly hard to figure out. So, it's a gull is fine in some cases. But yeah, it's just another dimension to add to that environment and to make you sort of have goals for yourself, to be able to find more birds and to identify new species. It's just a fun way to experience the natural world. And I highly recommend birds. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned something about birding. If you like these videos, please, of course, as they say on YouTube, like and subscribe to my channel. Hit the little bell if you want to receive notifications about new videos. And until next time, have a great day.